Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Open Championship Initial Research Show. What a fantastic week by all means. We had the outright on Bobby Mack at the Scottish Open coming in at 40-1. I had 40% of the playoff at the ISCO. Unfortunately, couldn't get Rico Hoey or Pearson Coody across the finish line there. But still no complaints, as I also had a lineup that finished third in one of the ISCO DFS contests over at DraftKings. So, I mean, just overall, just a fantastic week. Nothing to complain about by any stretch. And it's a very welcome turn of events here, as the past 3 or 4 weeks had been struggling a little bit. So I hope you joined me in the success this week. Played all of the Bobby Mack, had the Bobby Mack outright, played a lot of Adam Scott, who I suggested quite heavily for the Scottish Open. Hopefully you played a lot of the ISCO and followed me on a lot of the plays over there. I had a lineup that had Harry Hall, Rico Hoey, Pearson Coody. Hoey and Coody were two of my bigger plays for the week, so I really hope you followed me this week, followed me in the success. And if you did, please let me know in the comments or in chat if you are able to catch it live. I do have a shout out to give Stewie, who has been in chat from time to time. Pretty pronounced person in the golf gambling Twitter sphere, if you will. He had both Harry Hall and Bobby Mack outrights this week. So congratulations, Stewie, on your 2 big hits. And again, if you had success, whether that is at the Scottish, at the ISCO, anything, let me know. Would love to be able to shout out other members of the community who have success. But we turn our attention forward to the final major of the year, the Open Championship, this year played at Royal Troon. We're going to have a little bit more information this week than we did last week for the Scottish Open. So without any further delay, let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Look, if a moron like me can hit Bobby Mack outrights and have 40% of the playoffs, then imagine what it can do in the power of your hands. So go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where every week I post research around the PGA Tour and past winners of the tournament of the week. So I will definitely have some information around the Open Championship tomorrow. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests I play. So if you follow me over on X, you would have seen the Bobby Mack. You would have seen the Rico Hoey and the Pearson Coody outright at the ISCO. So if you want to see my weekly betting cards and my top player usage, then give me a follow over at X. Finally, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. I know he had a decent amount of success this week as well. So you really are missing out if you are not subscribed to his article. Like I said, I just can't recommend it enough to you all. So make sure you go subscribe to that article. It is free to do, by the way, and show him some support. Follow him over on social media. Lastly, we are live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all in addition to any success that you all had. How do you think Royal Troon's going to play? What do you remember of the showdown between Stinson and Phil Mickelson in 2016? What types of players do you think it favors at Royal Troon? So would love to hear your thoughts as we start our week of preparation for the Open Championship. So let's do our initial research for the 2024 Open Championship. And we start, as we did last week, we're going to go straight to the course breakdown in Fantasy National, since this is not being held stateside. We don't have any tournament fact sheet from the GCSAA, and of course we customarily start our look at the weather on Monday evening, so that'll start tomorrow if we want to take into consideration any wind or perhaps any wave advantage. But we start with a brief overview of Royal Troon, and a lot of this information is taken directly from Gabe's article. So credit where it's due. This is from Gabe's article. Royal Troon is a par 71, links design, coastal links design, if you want to be exact. 4 par 3s, 3 par 5s. Royal Troon has held a few Open Championships through the years. The most recent, as I mentioned, in 2016, the showdown between Stinson and Phil Mickelson. But Royal Troon is kind of separated into 3 distinct parts. You have a very, very gentleman's handshake to your round, the first maybe 6 to 7 holes. Pretty easy, or at least the easiest part of the course. You can't even say pretty easy because one of the easiest holes still plays over par. In fact, historically at Royal Troon, there's only been 3 holes that play under par. 2 of the par 5s, par 5 16th, par 5 4th, and the par 4 7th. You see, the fourth easiest hole actually plays to par as a par 5. But as I was saying, 3 pretty distinct parts of the course. First 6 or 7 holes, kind of a gentle handshake. Easiest part of the course, definitely, considering the wind direction normally is with the wind. So you're downwind playing these holes. Then you start to make the turn. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This area plays a lot of crosswinds. And then the final 5 to 6 holes, the longest part of the course, plays usually directly into the wind, and is very, very difficult. The phrasing that I've heard is heaven, purgatory, and hell for the 3 distinct portions of the golf course. So just be mindful of that players that are starting on hole 1 generally have an easier go of it, considering they get a nice warm-up into their round. As you can see, the second easiest hole, third easiest hole, even the fourth easiest hole here. The easiest hole is the par 5 16th. Only plays 542. It kind of breaks up the long, difficult portion of the back 9 and that closing stretch at Royal Troon, as I spill water all over myself. But taking a more specific look at Royal Troon, the 3 par 5s, pretty long here, with the exception of maybe the 542, but it definitely plays a whole lot longer considering you are into the wind. You've got 601 and 560 on the par 5s, so pretty long. Generally fairly difficult. Not a whole lot of eagles, as you see. 1.5 eagle rate, 1% eagle rate, less than 1% eagle rate. Decent birdie chances, not a whole lot of eagles. The par 3s are very long and very difficult, except for maybe the signature hole at Royal Troon, known as the postage stamp, just 123 yards. Here, the par 3 8th. But the other par 3s, 210, 178, but plays directly into the wind most of the time, so very, very difficult. And then 222. So long, difficult par 3s here. Lots of long par 4s, just very, very difficult. The total yardage here, it's a par 71 measuring just under 7,400 yards. I think the yardage that Gabe gave was 7,380 something. So just under 7,400 yards. So a pretty darn long course here at Royal Troon. If we take a look at some of the statistics, we only have 2 years, 2016 and then all the way back to 2004, which I don't want to really give this a whole lot of attention, considering these are mostly brand new golfers, and you go this far back, you go 20 years back, and data gets insignificant and whatnot. So not a whole lot of data around Royal Troon. We'll mostly be looking at Open Championships in general this week, but a little bit around Royal Troon. Of course, no strokes gained by shot type, since there is no shot link over there, so we don't have any approach, putting off the tee or anything. So we look at strokes gained by hole by par for the two 21st century Open Championships held at Troon. Par 5s are where the professionals are going to make a lot of their strokes gained. As you can see, we move up to the top 5s. The par 3s start to gain a little bit, and then for our winners, the par 3s really rise. So I'll be interested to see what that looks like in Microsoft Excel tomorrow in the Data Dive show, and as we go through maybe a couple of prior leaderboards, especially 2016s, to see how it played. But you don't want to ignore the par 5s by any means. They're going to be the best scoring opportunities. But these par 3s, a lot of players can make up a lot of ground here with these par 3s. Moving forward, hole composition, you cannot look at this. Of course, we know that they have some very long par 3s and all this, so can't really go by that. But what we can see from these 2 years is how relatively the course played, and it played very, very difficult. Driving accuracy, even with players clubbing down in 2016, the fairways were still difficult to hit. 55% here versus 62% at the average tour event. Hitting the greens is also a big problem here. 57% versus about 65-66% at the average tour event. So greens aren't easy to hit. Fairways aren't easy to hit. Scrambling is not easy here. Just a very, very difficult course, Royal Troon. And you see every single round in 2016, if I can get it to highlight, every single round in 2016 played to difficult. These greens are a combination of bent and fescue, so much like the Scottish Open, not going to do anything with a surface type around greens. We're just going to be looking at slow greens. I think that ended up being pretty good for the Scottish Open, and I would expect Royal Troon to play very similarly. So without any strokes gained data to really dig into, let's just kind of take a look at everything here from our players in the field this week. This will need to be updated. The players that finished in the top 10 at the Scottish Open are not in here. Players like Aaron Rye, who qualified thanks to their top 10 at the Scottish Open. So I don't have that exact list of players, but they will be loaded in tomorrow for the Open Championship. As you can see, Rye not in here yet. But in rounds that are difficult, I do expect Troon to play pretty difficult, even if the wind does stay down, and we'll start looking at wind and stuff tomorrow. But even with it, or even if the wind stays down, I do expect it to be difficult. So when rounds have been difficult relative to par in the past 2 years, our top off the tee players have been Rory, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Tyrrell Hatton, Siwoo Kim, Bryson, Minwoo Lee, Jordan Spieth, and Ben On. Those are your top 10 in terms of off the tee when rounds have been difficult relative to par. Didn't mention this in terms of architect, but none of the three main architects here in Fantasy National is not one of their courses over at Royal Troon, so we're not going to be looking at any architect filters either this week. You could look at Open Championship statistics here, and I might do that here momentarily. But I am still going to be looking at some things with this difficult relative to par filter selected. So there's your top 10 off the tee. I do want to look at some around the green as well. And just conveniently, with the fact that we have this difficult relative to par filter selected, your top around the green players when rounds have been difficult relative to par: Hideki, Scotty Scheffler, Brendan Todd, Brooks Koepka, Tommy Fleetwood, Davis Thompson, C.T. Pan, Padraig Harrington, Stefan Jaeger, and Seabez. Again, in the last 2 years, there's your top 10 in terms of around the green performance when rounds have been difficult relative to par. A couple other just big picture views, if you will. Let's take a look at approach. We'll look at just the past 3 months, just get an idea of who has been hitting their irons very, very well in the recency. So our top approach players in the past 24 rounds or 3 months: Scotty, Tony Finau, Corey Connors, Xander, Tom Hoge, Sepp Straka, Victor Hovland, Ben Griffin, Rory, and Russell Henley. Those are your top 10 in terms of approach. And then lastly, in terms of a strokes gained page view, just a big picture view, if you will, we're definitely going to look at a little bit of putting. I'm just going to use that Velcro speed filter in Fantasy National. It seemed to work well for the Scottish Open. They cannot let these greens get very quick, generally due to the wind over there. So in the past 2 years, or 36 rounds, but nobody has 36 rounds. So in the past 2 years, on Velcro speed greens, on slow greens, our top putters have been Denny McCarthy, Emiliano Grillo, Sung Jae, Akshay Bhatia, Alex Bjork, Adam Scott, Brendan Todd, Justin Rose, Adam Schenk, and John Rahm. Interesting, I do want to check in on this Open Championship filter here in Fantasy National. And we'll go back as 36 rounds. Yeah, 36 rounds should be okay. Of course, no around the green, no putting. We're just going to have a strokes gained total. While there is some data here in off the tee and approach, I'm going to tell you right now, it's all from 1 year, just 1 year of data. So I do not want to incorporate this, and I'll just go ahead and give you a sneak peek in terms of the early look file. Get that changed. So I removed the 1 year that the off the tee and the approach were factored in. Still didn't get around the green or putting for that year. So I'm going to be ignoring this. But in Open Championships, in the past 36 rounds, so Spieth, this goes all the way back to 2014. I myself have gone all the way back to 2012. But if you are curious, then in the past 36 rounds, our top Open Championship performers have been Jordan Spieth, Rory, Henrik Stenson, Zach Johnson, Francesco Molinari, Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, Ricky Fowler, Xander, and Cam Young. And you see Cam Young, it's only been 2 tournaments. His second place finish at the old course at St. Andrews. And then I believe it was a little bit lower than that. Open Championship. Nope, I guess I have to say the Open. There we go. So an eighth and a second for Cam Young in those 2 appearances. So there's a look at a few kind of big picture view items, mainly with my assumption being that this is going to be difficult, using the difficult relative to par filter. We can take a look at a couple of other things perhaps as well. Definitely want to look at some par 5 scoring. These are the 3 of the 4 easiest holes here. So players are going to have to take advantage of the par 5s. Again, from the course breakdown, there's a 560, 601, 542, but plays a whole lot longer because it's generally into the wind. As of right now, I would just say par 5s, although if you wanted to hedge, probably looking more at the 550 to 600 range. But your top par 5 performers, we'll just do this PGA Tour season. Yeah. Your top par 5 performers have been Mackenzie Hughes, Tony Finau, Xander, Scotty Scheffler, Billy Horschel, Davis Thompson, Rory, Victor Perry, Patrick Cantlay, and Collin Morikawa. All right, with that, let's kind of dig in a little bit more to some past Open Championship performance. Of course, our defending champion, Brian Harman, who in the last 3 years has played very, very well. Now, granted, didn't make the cut in the prior 2 to those. In the past 5 years, our strokes gained total leader is Tommy Fleetwood. Runner-up, another top 5, another top 10, a top 15. He's generally played very, very well at Open Championships. Jordan Spieth, who we also mentioned, a runner-up 3 years ago. Top 10, top 10, top 20. Played very well. Rory. Those 3 have kind of separated themselves from the rest of the pack in terms of strokes gained total. Again, defending champion Brian Harman. Xander, generally pretty darn solid. He's had, a couple of more middling performances, but generally fairly solid. Jon Rahm has been very good. Tony Finau did miss the cut last year, but a top 10, a solo third, and a top 15. He's played well. Lowry, his win in 2019. As we move on down, Louis Oosthuizen, of course. Victor Hovland has been very good at Open Championships. Cam Smith, his win at St. Andrews 2 years ago. Generally been pretty good. Talked about Cam Young, 2nd and an 8th. Francesco Molinari, 3 for 5 with a win. Some other notables here, Terrell Hatton, Cantlay, Ricky Fowler's 4 for 4 in the past 5 years. Scotty Scheffler's 3 for 3, not necessarily to the elite level that Scheffler has been on lately, but the top 10 and 2 other top 25s, solid, very solid. Fitzpatrick 4 for 5, Bobby Mack 4 for 4, a couple of top 10s there. He was pretty poor last year, but otherwise solid. Brooks, as you would expect, Stenson, Rose. So those are some of the players that have played well in the most recent Open Championships. The other side of that coin, players who have not played well in Open Championships. Of course, Phil Mickelson getting up there in age, but he's not played very well in the last 5 major championships. Jorge Campillo, Patty Harrington, Ernie Els, Daly. Let's get some of the younger guys. So Gary Woodland has not performed well. Keegan Bradley has been very poor at Open Championships. McCarthy and Shank only one time. Sung Jae did top 20 last year, but pretty poor otherwise, at least in the last 5 years. Tom Hoagie, 0 for 2. And again, I mentioned this during the Scottish Open DFS Tactics show. Like, he really rose on or in my rankings because he generally putts slow greens well, but you just have to understand the limitations of what you're looking at. So I would be a little bit wary of Tom Hoagie considering his lackluster performance in Open Championships. Russell Henley 1 for 4, Guido 1 for 3, Harris English 1 for 3, Burns 2 for 3, but nothing inspiring in terms of finishes. Kitayama 2 for 4. So there's a look at the players who have not played well in recent Open Championships. Okay, so with that, we will move right along to the early look file that I have made for the week. And you'll notice, just like with the other major championships, I take this all the way back to 2012 because generally, except for the Masters, obviously, these courses change. And I do think that of the majors, or of the 3 rotating majors, this is probably the one that it's most appropriate to look at more historical data, because links golf is such a a different game that players generally just either really like it or really don't. And most of the courses over or in the Open Championship Rota play fairly similarly. I mean, they have their quirks and different oddities and stuff, but generally kind of play the same. So if we take a look at the players who have played the best going back to 2012, let's take a look at what they have been doing well. Again, no strokes gained data, so we can't do much with that. So we're going to start with driving in greens, fairways, and whatnot. We see of the players who have averaged a top 40, distance does appear to be a thing. With that said, Royal Troon, a lot of players decide to club down off the tee to ensure that they're in the fairway. So how much are we going to really want to factor in distance? It's hard to say. It really is. Gabe and I have already had some discussions over the weekend on how we're going to try and approach or tackle building models for this week. So of the players that have played and had some success in previous Open Championships, a lot of them do have quite a bit in terms of distance. This is of the players who have averaged a top 40. I mean, this is an 18. That's a fairly high number. Fairways, surprisingly to me at least, not all that much. This is just a 1.0. Now, the way I understand Royal Troon is that you do have a little bit of a sliver of of a first cut, if you will, where the rough isn't too bad, but the more wayward you get, the higher the gorse and fescue and whatever else they call it over there, just gnarly stuff, the worse it is. So if you're just off the fairway, I don't think it's too bad. Which leads me again to think about good drives gained, where players are either in the fairway or they are still able to hit the green from the rough, just because they are either that good of iron players or they just didn't miss the fairway by that much. A couple players negative here, but for the most part, we've got some pretty solid performances. This is a 2.4. This greens number is very high. Only one player negative in terms of greens gained. Two players in the top 40. Burmester here at 2/10, and J-Day all the way down at 40th with 4/10. So this greens number looks to be rather large. This is a 2.8. The good drives gained was 2.4. Much like I did with the Scottish last week, this might be something where I kind of put 5% in a lot of these variable metrics, just to have a little bit of a hedge. And again, right now I would lean towards difficult relative to par, but we'll really try to narrow that in throughout the week once we see the forecast. So there's the greens and the good drives gained. I'm leaning towards these two mainly right now. It is rather startling to see just how much distance has played a factor for the majority of the players who have performed well at Open Championships. So perhaps that's something not to be ignored. When you're thinking about good drives gained and driving distance, that just kind of leads to off the tee. But again, most of the players, at least in 2016, decided to club down. So I don't know how much off the tee would really factor. Something we'll have to think about, and would be interested to hear the community's thoughts. So put it in chat or put it in the comments if you're not able to catch the show live. We move to scoring. Again, much like most weeks, the higher raw numbers probably are going to be in the birdies gained. However, the more consistent metric, as not a single player in the top 40, not a single player is negative in bogey avoidance. That's what you would expect, that you would want to look at bogey avoidance when rounds are difficult relative to par. At least that's Probably that should be your first inclination. But it's hard to ignore, like Cameron Young here with a bunch of birdies. Victor Hovland has been favoring the birdies. Will Zalatoris has favored the birdies. We're not going to do anything with eagles. There's very few eagles around Troon. Now, if we see that there's going to be rain in the forecast, or they've gotten rain already leading up to the tournament, then we might want to think about more birdies gained and opportunities. But, I mean, it's pretty startling to see not a single player negative bogey avoidance. This is a 2.3, whereas the birdies gained is a 2.3. Really kind of being propped up by Cam Young here. If you take him out, it falls to a 2.1. So more so looking at the bogey avoidance. We move to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Again, each course is different. So not sure we're going to want to focus on a particular range, at least as of right now. Maybe the 450 to 500 par 4s, just because that's the most prevalent length of par 4 here. Although there are a few shorter par 4s, absolutely. But par 3s, we saw just how much they played a factor at Troon in 2004 and 2016. This is a pretty large number here. And only one player negative. So that's important to see. Only one player negative in par 3 performance. So we definitely are going to want to give par 3s their due respect this week. Moving to par 4s, yeah, all but one player negative, or all players are performing very well except for one in terms of par 4s, and then par 5s as well. So interesting stuff here. We'll be able to dig in much more tomorrow night in the Data Dive show. Quite a bit of a shorter show, but again with no GCSA tournament fact sheet, nothing off the tee approach, no strokes gained by shot type data. A lot like the Scottish last week, we just don't have a lot to go on, with the exception that I'm going to be factoring in Open Championship history quite heavily this week. So again, players like Adam Scott, who are 10 for 11, average finish of 31st. Players like Tony Finau, 6 for 7, average finish of 27th. Jordan, I don't know if I still want to go to Jordan, but Jordan, 10 for 10. Xander, 6 for 6, average finish of 20th. These players who have year over year played Open Championships very, very well. But that's going to be it for the show this evening. Again, a little bit of a shorter show. We'll have a lot more to cover tomorrow. But I hope you all followed in all of the success that I myself had this week. Of course, the Bobby Mack outright had a big sweat at the ISCO as well. Couldn't get Pearson Coody or Rico Hoey across the finish line, but had 40% of the playoff. I had a third place lineup for a contest at the ISCO, so it was a very, very good week in time for the last major of the year. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching, listening, and supporting the channel, liking the video, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports and golf statistics mainly, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. This week was a much better venture into that than the past month or so has been. So we're going to try to keep the momentum this week for the Open Championship and the Barracuda. So don't forget to set your reminders this week that, like last week, we have a full slate of shows this week. Tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday, the customary research, data, and DFS for the Open Championship. And then Tuesday night, I'm going to have the full show for the Barracuda. A very fun tournament, different format, as it's the modified stable format. So you don't want to miss out on that. Make sure you set your reminders for that. But thanks again for all the support, and let me know of any success that you had. I would love to be able to shout out members of the community who had success this week. For all the wagers you made this past week for the Scottish Open and the ISCO, for all the DFS contests you played this past week for the Scottish Open and the ISCO. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Open Championship Data Dive Show, may all your bets be profitable.